Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our Masterclass Friday. We're so excited to have everyone. It's our first Masterclass Friday in so long. So we're excited that you are spending our Friday with us. We are here today to learn about Fashion 101, just about the basics of fashion, and you'll also be learning about sustainability. I would like to thank Andy Lustig for being here today. She's our presenter for this session, and I'll pass it over to Andy.
Thank you for the intro. Guys, happy Friday, TGIF. So yes, today we are here to learn Fashion Basics 101, an intro to working in fashion. Oh shoot. So first I'll be doing a little introduction for myself, and then we'll just go over some quick facts from the industry, some key player breakdown, then workflow and roles, sustainability and design, and then we can do some Q&A after that. Okay. So just a little bit about myself. I went to the University of Wisconsin and then FIT, and it was a dual diploma program where I then was released into New York City, where I started working. I worked at lifestyle large corporate companies like BCBG, Free People, Ralph Lauren, American Eagle, and The Gap. Then a couple years into my career, I started traveling, which was really always my goal. One of the reasons I wanted to get into fashion was to see the world. So when I was at Free People, I started traveling a lot. I'd go to Japan to go shopping. They would send me to England. They would send me all over the place. And then they would also send me to factories to work on development. So I would find inspiration. I would then go to the factories. I would set up new development. And at the same time, I would be doing production follow-up. I would work with agents. I would also sometimes be at the factories, and sometimes I would be at the factory for a month at a time. So I did all kinds of different work trips. Then in 2017, he actually had been a few years old at this point, but it was really 2017 was the time where I decided that I needed to kind of shift my career. I was in a meeting and we were talking about how we needed some product on a specific table in the store. And I said, well, what happened to that product? And they said, oh, the factory, there was an issue at the factory. And then I basically later learned that the issue at the factory was the Rana Plaza collapse, which basically the entire factory collapsed. 1,100 people were killed, 2,500 people were seriously injured, and it was completely avoidable. So at that point, I just couldn't go to another meeting and hear there was an issue, and the issue would be a monsoon or something that's completely out of the hands of these people, and we're sitting here just waiting for inventory, and that's all that matters. So I basically went back to school to get my master's in sustainability. I went to Pratt, where we worked, we learned about social and environmental sustainability. And I was lucky enough in my time there to work with Eileen Fisher and Fab Scrap, which are two companies who are really pioneers in the space. I did my thesis with Eileen Fisher. I'm happy to talk more about these companies at the end if anyone's curious. And then today I am a designer. I work at The Gap, which is where I worked before I went to school. It's a very different landscape today than it was before COVID. So a lot of exciting things are happening, a lot of changes. And it's oh goodness, I hope this doesn't ding the whole time, sorry. And it's a very exciting time to be working from a sustainability point of view. And also just because everyone's trying to get their arms around what the new temperature of the consumer is post-COVID. So the world is there's a lot of change happening. And because of this is actually what brought me to teaching this class. So going back into working in the industry after COVID, being on screens the way we are now, and just kind of realizing like how difficult it is to be a new person in the industry in this climate. It's very hard to understand how a company works, how to understand the culture, how to understand what's authentic to that company when so much of this is tied up in brand identity and the way that people work. How do you absorb that through a screen? How do you absorb the way people behave and the the corporate identity. So I kind of felt like, it's something that I can pass on to people because I have been in the industry and I've been at enough companies where I understand it's pretty much like this at these big companies, and just the workflow and the interconnected nature of the industry. So just a little bit about the fashion industry. Most of you know, we are in New York City. The Garment Center is in Midtown. The New York City fashion industry employs 180,000 people, and it's $11 billion in wages. There are 900 fashion companies, and that doesn't include the trade shows and the showrooms. And also all the support around the fashion industry, the sample rooms. So it's a massive industry. We are in the right place if you want to be in fashion. As many of you know, a lot of this activity is moving into Brooklyn. So it's moving into the Navy Yard and Sunset Park, and a lot of design companies are also moving out of the city into Brooklyn. So let's see. All right, so fashion is growing to match the needs of the consumer. Consumption is increasing. It's increased 400% in the last 2 decades. So basically, as you can see on this chart, consumption is going up. People want more and more. The cost of clothing is going down, and the amount of times per life of a garment that the consumer is using that garment is decreasing significantly as well. So this is what is creating fast fashion. So companies are struggling to keep up with the needs and the appetite of consumers. Companies used to create seasonal wardrobes, 4, 5, 6 offerings a year. Now we offer 12 to 24 collections a year. So we are designing capsules every at least 4 weeks, so that every time the customer goes into the store, we can keep up with what Zara offers. Every time you go to Zara, every time you go to H&M, you walk in and you're like, ooh, I didn't see that before, that's cute, and you grab it. So everybody now has to keep up with that behavior because that's what customers want and expect. So these are all the roles. These are my teammates. These are the people who, this is the team that helps to bring a garment from concept all the way through to production. So as I said, I'm a designer. These are the people I work with, and I could not do my job without these 3 other departments. The first group, designers, are responsible for inspiration boards, color, fabric, and print direction. They create new styles that are customer and brand appropriate. How does the design stay authentic? Designers have to interpret brands. It's not just about, they have to interpret trends to be authentic to whatever brand you work for. We attend technical fits with technical designers, but you also have to have a clear understanding of garment construction and how things work, because you need to know what kind of questions to ask. And we generally follow the product from concept through to production. So the second group, okay, let's just go back to production. Production decides what factory in which country is best to handle each garment and allocates them accordingly, while attempting not to overburden any one vendor. They also make sure production standards are upheld, and they work closely with vendors on a daily basis in the process and negotiate cost. The third group, technical designers, are handed a flat sketch from designers, which they make 3-dimensional. They do this by creating a tech back, which attaches numbers and construction details to the sketch to help factories bring the garment to life. And the fourth group, which is merchants, have a big picture of business, store, and customer needs. They analyze sales from past seasons to figure out what colors are most successful, how many options to give customers, and how many of each piece should be ordered. The design input of this position varies from company to company. Some companies will be very specific with design about what styles have to go back into the store to protect business. This position is highly analytical, but I've been in companies where merchants design along with the factory to put things in the lines that they feel are missing. All right, so this is a systems chart that I created of an American mass market apparel company, just to make it very clear about all the stages and how every department is working when each different departments working alongside each other. So you can see it's a lot of teamwork and it's a lot of like pulsing of different departments. So it's a 10-stage process. And the first stage is the inspiration stage. It takes place at the beginning of every season. The designer will look to sources, including magazines, museums, shops, and blogs to collect newness. The line plan is provided from the merchants so that designers know exactly what they need to design into. So it will tell you how many styles, what kind of business you're comping, like we talked about above. So this information is usually derived from previous season selling. So you're always comping LY, which is last year. This is like a very interesting position right now because nothing makes sense anymore. So last year was COVID. So consumer behavior, everybody from your own personal experience knows that we were all wearing sweatpants and pajamas. So consumer behavior shifted dramatically from what you're wearing, if you're buying a new purse, if you're wearing high heel shoes, if you want to look cute, to, okay, I'm just gonna like buy some comfy tie-dye sweatpants suits and like try to make it happen on Zoom calls. So basically right now I'm in a department, I work in sleep, and business was up like 100% last year. And now everyone's sitting there scratching their head, looking at these numbers and trying to comp last year and beat it. And that's just not feasible. So we basically were in this position where like we're used to following last year and saying, wow, we're amazing now. But then you have to realize that like business is going back into the woven, away from the knits, because people want to like go out of the house and feel, you know, presentable again. So it's a really interesting time to see how companies are kind of trying to like get their footing and readjust to consumer behavior and understand the knock-on effect of all of these changes that happened over the past couple of years. Another thing that can happen that affects these numbers can be climate change. So if we're doing hot market stores and all of a sudden spring is significantly earlier, we have to adjust and not offer them like turtlenecks and when it's like 80 degrees outside. So this is an example of an inspiration board. So the sketching stage. Designers will sketch into each opening of the line, creating new styles and updating older ones. And this can look different depending on how you process, what your creative process is. Of course, every company then is going to have boards where I'm on a design team with so many other designers, and all of the sketches need to look like they came out of the same person. So usually companies will have like a croquis that you use. I work in Illustrator. We all kind of follow the same pen widths and brushes so that it all looks like the same person designed it, even though there's like 2 designers on every team and every department has like 10 of us. So you'll kind of just have to assimilate into whatever that company uses. So then sketch approval. For sketch approval, designers will present the ideas in sketch form to merchants. And here we are. And of course, they'll love every single sketch, but usually there is a lot of input and you always just kind of have yourself covered. You design over and you also just take away their comments and you can always sketch into whatever it is, whatever changes there are. But you know, we're all friends here, so it's usually good. Then let's see, once the sketches have been approved, designers will pass their sketches to tech and production. Designers communicate their desired aesthetic, fit, and look to the tech designer. Tech designers create a tech pack to communicate that information to the agent. Production will allocate each style to the agent at this point that they feel can handle it best, based on difficulty, quantities, and timelines. So this is a picture from the 70s, but it was the best picture to capture exactly what I do. So it still looks exactly like this. You sit there with your team. That looks like there's a production, a tech, and a designer. You're going through all of your measurements. You're showing tears as far as fit inspiration. Maybe there's like a sleeve inspiration. You have samples behind you, and you're really talking about everything. As you can see in this picture, you're going to talk about, and this is where you need to know your technical design as well, what kind of hem you want, what your sweep is like. If you're adding a ruffle, what kind of shear ratio would you like? And you don't always need to know those numbers, but you have to have some kind of visual. So then the tech pack is sent to vendors. So once, let's see. So the tech pack is released to the agents, and then they allocate the design to one of their many factories who are pre-approved by our production team. The factory uses the designer's sketch and also the bill of material, which has all of the fabric and trim information, color information, and then the tech designer also has their parts of the tech pack that they own that has measurements and construction details. So this is a finished tech pack. You can see above, this is the BOM, where it would say what kind of fabrication you want, what kind of trim you want. You'll call out everything from thread to buttons. And then here's a very happy factory. So people are happily making the samples. And then one sample, which is your proto, will come back to your company, which is, in my case, in New York. And basically, they have merchants, designers, and production will all review samples together in line review. The team will start to assort the line to make sure that customer and business needs are met, and then everything looks good together, and then it can be outfitted easily. Many samples will drop in this stage, and often new sketches are rushed out to fill in any holes in the line that might exist. Whatever is in will then be fit. So technical design and design will usually fit on a live model. There's usually 1 to 3 fittings, depending on the complexity of the style. It's lovely to fit on a real model. Ever since COVID, I have not fit on a real model. So I've been fitting on forms, which is a bummer. It's always good to have a real person, and then they can move their arms and see how things feel, or if there's a scratchy seam, it's always very, very helpful. Then the garment will be released to production. So once the fit is perfect and the tech designer has done their grading and the designers have finalized their bill of materials, which has to have all the correct CCs, you have to make sure all the correct trims are in. It has happened. We're all human. We're people make mistakes, but you have to be really careful at this point, because from here, potentially hundreds of thousands of samples will be made. And then the garment is shipped to store. So depending on what the timeline is like, it can be sent by freight or air, and it will then be distributed to stores. This is another thing that has been really affected by COVID. The importance of brick and mortar store is something that everyone is questioning. And then if people are online shopping more, whatever that consumer behavior is, everyone's trying to adjust to it. So the important thing is getting the inventory where it needs to be when it needs to be there. And this is something really tricky that companies are trying to figure out. So then the final stage of the process is the transfer of ownership of the garment from the company to the owner. And as I said, I know that I mentioned in the beginning, and you can see a little line at the bottom, it's a linear system. So everything is going in one direction. And unfortunately, at the end of that direction is a trash can. So this is a good segue into sustainability. So we basically, as I said, consumption has gone up 400%. And it's a lot of goods that are flowing, as you saw, in one direction, which is from a company to a consumer. And then consumers often, you can all speak from personal experience, you try to give it to somebody, maybe people don't want it. Maybe the clothing quality wasn't very good in the first place. So if you can't really do anything with it, sometimes it does end up, you try to put it in Goodwill, but often people do throw their clothing in the trash. So it's a massive problem considering how much people are consuming. So one garbage truck of clothing is burned or landfilled every second. That's enough to fill 1.5 Empire State Buildings every day. And that's enough to fill Sydney Harbor every year. We've been studying the current system, which flows in one direction. So that's linear. As we know, there is no end of life plan in store when most garments are designed. The main objective is to sell, and beyond that, nothing more is considered. There is nothing required of the company to think about this part of the life cycle. And until some kind of government hand can step in and require companies to do so, companies are not very motivated, aside from any kind of consumer pressure, where customers like to think, okay, if I like give it back, then I don't feel as guilty about buying another one. So it's really all led by the companies and the consumers at this point. A recycling economy, which is the second one, is where a company will prolong the amount of time from the point where it's being used to in the garbage. So maybe they have a recycling program where they take it back and have they help you bring it back, and maybe have a resale program, just prolonging the amount of time until it ultimately from the second owner will go in the garbage. A circular economy, which is the perfect scenario, is where they will have a take back program. They'll have a platform where they resell it to a second person, a second owner. Then after the second owner, they say, give it back. We will give you a gift card to buy something else. They motivate people to bring it back to them. And then they have another use in store for that garment, whether it's making a pillow, making a rug, turning it into insulation, recycling into new fabric, whatever it is, they're keeping it out of the garbage. So let's see. So some companies realize that they can make a second market off of their clothing. It's smart. They're making money off of this. They're generating a whole secondary business. Some companies that are really great at this are Patagonia and Eileen Fisher. They are pioneers in this area. So Patagonia has said, give it back to us, and they resell it. They have the facilities to mend it. And if there's absolutely no use for it, they can recycle their fabric. Eileen Fisher, they have a store called Renew, where they sell secondhand stores. They sell secondhand garments. And then Waste No More, which is where they will take fabric scraps, or they'll take old garments fabrication and refelt it, turn it into pillows, or patchwork it into a purse. So they're kind of doing their best to have zero waste. So today we discussed the way the current system works and how sustainability is changing the industry because of consumer-driven pressure. We've discussed the way COVID has changed the way we did business, and how companies are still trying to figure out new consumer behaviors. The industry is in a state of shifting and changing and improvement, and it's an exciting time to be a part of it because everyone's kind of realized things are not working, everything is currently changing, and I think everyone is trying to figure out new systems. So it really is an empowering time to be here, and where better to be than New York. So we're in the right place for it. So I would like to open the floor if anybody has any questions, or if there's any part that I breezed over that people want to talk more about. I'm happy to answer questions. Or if people just want to email me, here's my email address, or you can LinkedIn.
I would love to learn more about new materials like you're working with or researching to incorporate in a more like sustainable design.
Yeah, so right now I work in sleepwear. The number one thing, it's very tricky. The hard thing about trying to make the right sustainable decision is realizing that one thing that you think might be the right decision in a silo might not make a big decision, might be the right decision when you zoom out. So for example, I'm going to give an example of not where I work right now, but a smaller company that I heard speak when I was in school. So it was a designer who wanted to do everything locally and wanted everything to be sustainable. She wanted to use organic cotton, but the organic cotton came from another country. And in order for her to bring the organic cotton to New York, in order to produce her clothing, the impact of the oil from the air, from like traveling, so if you're flying it or even if you're shipping it, the impact of the travel to get the organic cotton to her factory negated the benefit of using organic cotton in the first place. So she ended up using domestic cotton, which made it somehow made her like sustainability indicators higher than actually using the fabric, which is more sustainable. So you really have to think about every single factor, where your factory is, how much things are traveling. Can you streamline as many processes as possible? So this is the tricky thing in something that that infamous term greenwashing. Like, can you call it sustainable if you're doing one good thing, but then something else you're doing further down the line makes it not sustainable? So in sleep, for example, we use organic cotton, which is sustainable because you're using less pesticides, less water. It is healthier for your body. It's healthier for the earth. And then on loose fitting sleep, we use 100% recycled polyester. But, when you wash polyester, plastic goes into the waterways. It's all about like, how many times are you washing it? You want to wash these things as few times as possible. It's one of those issues that like, there is no right answer. Unless the true sustainable thing is not buying more things and using goods that already exist. But how do you scale that up? These are the things that there is no like succinct answer to. But there are people who work with sustainable fibers. That's just not necessarily something that I work in, but it is for big companies really hard to make the right choices and to not greenwash sometimes. Does that answer your question without answering your question?
Yes, it does. Is there like a specific goal you have for that you're working towards for GAP that you want to incorporate like within sustainability, like either personal or like team goal?
Yeah, I know that sleep is the most sustainable department within the company because it is majority organic. It's all organic or recycled. One thing that I'm looking at is that I've been emailing with my production team about is the fact that our pajamas are 100%. So the tight fit is 100% organic cotton. The thread is poly. And I said, okay, if we wanted to recycle this garment further down the line, so if we make a platform where we're saying, okay, bring us back your organic cotton pajamas, and we have new plans for these bodies, and we could recycle the cotton, we could turn it into a new fabric, we could make all new brand new samples with it. If we knew exactly what we wanted to do with it, for example, if we wanted to recycle cotton, it would make sense to have cotton thread, because otherwise the poly will make it like a lower quality of cotton fabric. Mm-hmm. But that would just be like, that makes sense to switch to cotton if we know for sure that we want to take the fabric back, that we want to take the pajamas back and make new fabric out of it. If the goal is to keep the pajamas alive for as long as possible, meaning like this boy wears them, then he passes them to the next door neighbor's kid, then his little brother wears them, then the girl down the street wears them, then maybe poly thread is the right thing to do because it's actually stronger. So I'm just sort of asking questions like, what's the impact of changing it to cotton? I know it makes it less strong. How much less strong? What's the tension difference? Like, how do you quantify to me, it is more expensive, but like, it's more expensive and less strong, but what does that actually mean? And what does that mean for the end goals of what we have in store for these pajamas if we do decide that we're responsible for these garments when people are done wearing them.
Mhm.
So it only makes sense if we know all the options of what can be done with these pajamas in the afterlife and what the goals are.
Okay. Thank
But that's
you.
just something that I've been kind of working with my production teams thinking about it.
Mhm.
But it's really just me trying to think up like one step ahead, hoping that one day the Gap will say, okay, bring it home because we can do something else with it.
Yeah.
But people do, they do have denim take back programs where they do recycle the denim, and that can be turned into, you can remake it into a new denim cloth, and then every time that you recycle a fiber, it becomes shorter and shorter and shorter. So at a certain point, it's no longer a high enough quality to turn into new fabric, and then it has to become insulation. But that is something that people are doing with denim.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Will this workshop be posted?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we are being recorded as we speak.
Andy, I have a question.
Yeah.
If money wasn't a factor, doing something in your space of sustainability, if someone gave you like $1 million and said, Andy, what would you want to do to change the world in terms of sustainability? What is your passion project that you're really focused on?
Okay, I think that in a perfect world, I would, I'm really into vintage, and I'm really into taking something old and figuring out how to make it new. And, when I worked at Free People, we would just go vintage shopping and rip 5 samples apart and like Frankenstein them back into something new. And it was amazing and fun. And if I could just get everybody's garbage and basically make it feel new again, have like a bunch of people with sewing machines just making everyone's trash into amazing garments, because I think we're just bored. But if you give it to someone else or show someone how to wear it in a different way, I think it's just all about this consumption, and this like massive appetite for newness can be achieved through so much more than just like buying another piece of clothing. You can do it with like a new belt, or like maybe it's pairing something together that you didn't think of before, or maybe it's even like what I would do in this little workshop that Ashna is telling me that I have the finances for. I will be, like remaking, refixing, mending people's old garments into something new and reselling it. And otherwise, I mean, this is 100% profit. Like this is otherwise becoming garbage.
So some kind of an upcycling workshop where people can bring in stuff. I think what happens is people don't have, like, not everyone is a creative person, right? Like even I studied fashion, but I enjoy a different side of it. So it's like, we need to have a place to go where we can work with a designer who can help us reimagine something that could look good on us. It already exists with a little bit of tweaks. It would be really interesting if the Gap did something like that. They have so many brands, and I know Athleta is the most sustainable and green out of all of them. They do so much. So I would love that. I think the idea is great of upcycling and reusing and turning something old into new and making it current. So yeah, I like all these ideas. I think it is great. The one that I am a little hesitant about is the use of like organic cotton. I know that is really sustainable, but looking at it from like a farmer's perspective, you just don't yield so much crop. And like we're talking about third world countries that maybe manufacture fiber and fabric, and then what it does to their livelihood. So I think it's so hard. There's no, like you said, there's no right and wrong. It's just what is the best solution for the time, for the place, for the company, for the organization that you're in. But we can all do more than we're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's tricky because, I mean, I always think about organic food. Like before the FDA came in and said, okay, let's make some rules about these words. everyone was calling things natural and organic and this and that. And someone has to come in and really start regulating these things, because by throwing a word or a hang tag on something, it's generating a ton of money, because the public thinks, okay, I don't feel bad buying this because it's organic or because it's ethical or green. And I think that greenwashing is a really dangerous thing.
Yeah, like my favorite used to be at the Gap, you could buy a cotton sweater and it would say cashmere like cotton. It's not a thing. Cashmere is a fiber, that's a woolen fiber, but the fiber content comes from the cashmere goat. Cotton is a long staple fiber, totally different. So there's no such thing, it's just genius marketing. So we all have to be a little bit more careful when we also buy something. If you're really into like 100% cotton, make sure you check the label that it truly is 100%, because it could say pure cotton, but only 20% of the garment is pure cotton.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really tricky, even for like, I look a lot when I shop online, when I'm doing research, and I'll see things that say sustainable or like ethical. And then when you try to find out what that means, so then you keep clicking into like, what is your ethical bucket or what is your sustainable bucket? And then you look to see, what does that mean? How are you defining, like, what are your markers? You have to go like 20 clicks in, and then it's just kind of like a work in progress page a lot. Like it's really, there's no substance in a lot of these companies to what they mean.
Yeah, I think the cost of regulating for a small business is really hard, because if you really want to be sustainable, you have to follow something from really seed to a finished garment, if you want to do it really the right way. And if you're not, I think it's costly. I wish there were like cheaper ways of producing that were cost efficient, but I think also the labor economy globally needs to be re-looked at. If we're saying that our need is not for like so much inventory production, right? Because at the end of the day, we're not selling. If the merchandisers, the people who basically come up with the line plan and say you need this and this, and then the inventory and planners say you should buy X number of units, if they all did such a beautiful, amazing job, we would really not be sitting on inventory. And because no one has a crystal ball, we produce what we produce and we're left with what we're left with. But I think the conversation is deeper than that, because I feel like we have to look at the labor pool that sews our clothes. And I really focus on overseas because that's where I grew up. I have also a lot of experience with the travel to Southeast Asia. So what skills then are we going to provide these people if we're saying we don't need so many of you to work in fashion, because we're turning the mentality of the customer a different way to be better for the environment? To me, it comes down then to education. What other technical skills should we be training these garment workers so they have something else to rely on for income?
Yep. Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, this is something that was a factor in making me decide I wanted to go back to school, because I just felt like I was saying, okay, it's next year. Now I'm comping business. I want the same customer who bought that to buy this. But I know there's nothing wrong with it, the one that they had last year. And I'm just constantly telling them, yeah, you want the new one, you want the new one. So it's like a perfect reinforcement loop where they're saying like, I want it. And I'm saying, well, I want you to take this. And we're all just like pushing product that nobody needs. So it is like it's an ethical issue. Like, I'm a clothing pusher and I need help. Like, I feel like it's like, hi, how do I like change the conversation about what I'm doing? And these are issues that I have as like a sustainable designer. I think when you work at a company like Eileen Fisher and like Patagonia, you have the machine behind you pushing in the same direction and having the same beliefs that you do. And granted, there's always like grumbles and, people, it's still a job. Like, people still feel like, well, I wish we could do more, or like this is happening and I wish it weren't. But it's really nice to be in a company that's like-minded and has those same goals. And I think it's more difficult when you have all this pressure to sell and make money, but you also like, you have to be sustainable, but it's kind of a box you're checking, and it's not necessarily like the conversation around organic cotton or recycled poly. It's like, there's a lot of low hanging fruit that people just pick and take it, so that it's like, okay, check, we're doing, okay, check, we're doing that. And there's so much more to be done. And I think, like, just for whatever it's worth, all of these fashion schools now, there's such a massive part of the education that's sustainable. So all of these people coming out of school and entering the industry now have this like education on sustainability and this desire to make things sustainable that upper management and the people who are like their bosses just aren't going to understand. So I think it's really going to do amazing things in this space also.
That's fascinating. Ladies, ask some questions. You all have worked with reusable leftover fabric.
And yes, who's Alicia Bennett? Because yes, like even clothes that go to Goodwill end up in a landfill. There's a ton of statistics on how, I mean, you put things in the bag and you're like, oh, I gave it to Goodwill, now I can go buy another shirt. Like, it's not like that. The majority of it ends up, people don't want all the secondhand clothing that we're producing. And it used to go overseas. Countries have banned receiving the US secondhand market. They don't want it. It's ruining their own economies. And it's killing local artisans. People don't want this stuff. There is no market for the amount of like Forever 21 clothes that exist secondhand. So is everybody, what do some people out there do? Does anyone want to come out there and say? Are you guys students? Are you working?
I can share. I work at Custom Collaborative, but I'm also a master's student at GCNYC.
Oh, cool.
I'm studying sustainable fashion.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I loved your presentation. Thank you for sharing. I would love to hear more about like your thesis and working with Eileen Fisher and Fab Scrap.
Yeah. So basically my thesis, I worked with Eileen Fisher. I worked with Renew. And for those of you who don't know, Renew is the take back program at Eileen Fisher. So they are like the first like loop, taking the clothing away from the trash stream. And they generate a ton of money just reselling product that they already sold once. So it's financially incredibly smart. They take it back. They give people a gift card for returning it to motivate them to do so. And then they dry clean it, they mend it if they have to. And it generates, it's a whole new income generator for them. And it's meaningful. And basically what I worked with them on my thesis about was trying to figure out a way to interject sustainability earlier on in the design cycle. So currently it's this idea that even at a place like Eileen Fisher, the designers are designing like how we were talking about, people don't really design for end of life. And they're not asking the Renew people what comes back. When it comes back, what are the problems? Where are the points of weakness within the garment? Are you seeing like certain garments come back and it always have holes in one area? Are certain garments harder to resell the second time? Or like they said they had a really hard time reselling pants in a specific fabric, and that fabric was like not holding up well, and certain colors didn't hold up well. And then certain colors are harder to recycle, even things like picking what kind of threads you use if they have certain end uses for it that they want to recycle that fabric later into. So it's just this idea that even a company like Eileen Fisher, where they're so incredibly sustainably minded, the designers are not having that conversation with this department that's, by the way, down the hall about how we can design in a way to make this back end process smoother. So they even had all the manpower and all the finances set up to be very like savvy recycling and diverting the waste. And, you know, they still had a hard time communicating. So my thesis was basically about how to improve the system, the fashion system, and possible sustainable interjection points, and whether it's like a sustainability liaison who's kind of like checking in with the sample and really like touching base at every single point, like I was showing you on my charts about the different stages of design. Does the sustainability person come in at the design stage, and then did they check in again at line review, and then did they check in again at production, and what department would they sit in? And basically just having an argument for like the importance for a sustainability person in the design phase. Because right now, sustainability in big companies like The Gap, like Ralph Lauren, like all of these companies, Free People, they don't have anything to do with the product. They basically sit in another department. Most of them are, I'm sure you know, like they are business people. So they could be analyzing tires for sustainability. It doesn't have to be fashion. They're just looking at systems. They're looking at everything has to have like a financial reason for changing. So maybe it's switching the lights to LED in a store, and like, okay, it's sustainable, and look at all this money we save. So there's always like a financial impact to making things more sustainable when it's a business person motivating the company to do these changes. So it has to be quantifiable. And sometimes in the fashion end of making it sustainable is quantifiable in a different way. And we don't exactly have those indicators yet to make it like super motivating from the company's perspective to do those things. So it's really this like long process that I kind of dove into and looked at other industries and compared basically different, like the pharmaceutical industry. I looked into fashion companies of small scales that are sustainable and compared all these different things that they're doing in initiatives and just the way they work. So yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a deep dive into process, which is why I have all these process pages that I was able to show.
That's so interesting. I think sustainability is all about like making progress in some way, and also like finding what's going to persuade people or motivate people to want to change, and give them a reason to, whether that's like right now it's of course money, but there are other reasons too. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, I think you know, your program did not exist when I was looking, by the way, but I do know like a lot of really amazing people are working there and have gone there. But I have a friend who went through a different program overseas, and then she came back, and she's also just sort of struggling with like, how do you motivate these big companies to do things? And the real way that I feel most designers push for these things to happen, it's all about customer perception. And the value of sustainability and doing things that feel like, it has to make you feel good. And that's really like the customer and their desire for things to be sustainable is like the number one thing pushing these companies to change, which is, if you think about it, like everything that's happening is not because of government regulation. It's because people want it to change, and government regulation needs to follow that, and it's not. So imagine the change that would happen if like these bills went through that keep almost like passing, and they just kind of like, they're not making it. But another really interesting thing to look at, and I haven't looked at it in a few years, is like Europe has a lot more regulations on fashion and what they can do. And if we can just like look to Europe a little bit more and hopefully use that as like an inspiration point, that would be going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree.
Yeah, so hopefully soon. There were some bills that were up and didn't go through. I'm sure, I feel like a lot of people at your school were very active about them. Michelle.
Yes.
Yep.
So hi everyone.
Hi.
My is Miriam Antoine. So thank you very much for coming to talk to us. And my question here, well, first I would like to make a comment. I think it takes a level of awareness in the fashion world and in relation to the planet that can bring about a strong understanding and importance of sustainability. That is my first comment. And in that same line of comment, in that same line of thought, you talk about Eileen Fisher, who's in the sustainability movement. So I would like to know more about her and her contact and how to follow her in LinkedIn, because as a matter of fact, during my graduation time in Custom Collab, I think really part of my vision was very keen on sustainability. So it does make sense that I would want to follow Miss Fisher on what she's doing. So,
Yeah.
and also if you don't mind sharing your email so that we can always stay in touch, Custom Collab.
Yes, please do. So my email is on this.
Yeah.
And I'll put it down here so you can just copy it. And then my LinkedIn is Andy Lustig. So I'll just, that's my email. And then my LinkedIn is Andy Lustig. Yeah, so Eileen Fisher is a designer. She has a design company. The company, I don't even think she's there anymore, or very rarely, but she's based in Irvington, which is in Westchester. And it's just part of her mantra. It's what she cares about. And it's her company, and it's part of her brand identity. It's rolled up in it. But definitely follow her, because even the website, if you go on the website, that is what every company should look like, as far as here's where we are. They have goals. And then at the end of the year, they release a review marking how they did to attain their goals. So this year, we only hit 50% of our goal. But next year, we're planning to do this to improve that. So they have goals. They tell you where they've landed. When they fail, they say, oops, we tried. And then they say, and here's our goal for next year. They're not just like saying the word sustainable over and over again. They're like using quantifiable things and then measuring it and then telling you when they did good and telling you when they didn't do good. And they're being really honest. So I think it's really like an inspiration, even just to model, like if you work in another company, to say like, could we do something like this? How could we integrate any of these business practices into what we do? It's very inspiring. And then, I mean, Fab Scrap, that's like, that's amazing. So basically, this woman named Jess, she used to work for the Department of Sanitation. And she then was realizing, as a way to reduce the amount of like trash flow, they were realizing how much fabric, and not even post-consumer, this is pre-consumer. So it's cutting room scraps coming out of the cutting rooms in the city, like in the fashion district. How do we capture the amount of fabric scraps coming off of cutting tables? So pre-consumer waste. And sometimes it's like dead bolts of fabric that like the production was less than the fabric they ordered, or this roll came in off standard compared to the other ones, or maybe there's a watermark on one corner and they can't use it. So the amount of fabric that was just becoming garbage because it just wasn't good enough for whatever purpose that company had, she was like, how do we capture this? How do we divert this? So she created a company called Fab Scrap, and they also work with fashion schools. So they would collect from like FIT or Parsons. They would donate to FIT and Parsons if they needed the fabric. And it just became like, again, this is the new way to be an entrepreneur. Let's look at something that's becoming garbage and how do we make a profit off of it? So now she's expanded to Philadelphia. Her office was in the city, in Brooklyn. and they expanded. Now they're in Philadelphia. They're next to Urban Outfitters. They actually expanded to be like in one of the buildings where the Urban Outfitters headquarters is. So they're taking fabric that otherwise would become trash and saying, fine, you can't do, it's not enough to do a full production for a company of, maybe it's just not enough fabric for one thing, but maybe for a small company it's enough. Or you know, I would receive emails from people saying, I'm a student and I'm looking for, you know, basically enough fabric to just do my runway show. Do you have anything that looks like this? Or I'm doing a really small run of fill in the blank, small designer. I'm trying to make bags. What kind of leather scraps do you have? What kind of denim scraps do you have? So, you know, it's just this idea that people are finding ways to keep these things out of the waste stream. Hi. So yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of people doing really inspiring things that who are out there.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm definitely going to try to follow them because it seems that this is part of my interests. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Okay, so it's Friday. If anyone wants to keep in touch with me, I do have to go back to work, sadly. But please, like, I put my email in the chat bar, LinkedIn me. It's always fun to chat with fellow sustainability people. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming and presenting today, Andy. Thank you. Really
Thank you.
grateful.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope this is not the last time we're seeing you.
Yeah, let's connect. I'm around. Let's do it.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Have a good one.